that's what the school newspaper should be now. It should be a school podcast, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
Or a school YouTube channel.
Yeah, I agree. And we, this is something I would like to introduce to the school, because we are Portland High School, but the way that Mainers talk, they drop R's all the time. So it really sounds like Podland High School. So it's perfect to have a podcast called Podland High School. So I think we've got the name, and that's like 90% of the job done right there if you've got a good name.
Hello and welcome to the Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Ruzicka.
And I'm Andres Lorente. And every couple weeks on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch films about either donkeys or Nazis or teachers.
Those are the main three, yeah.
That's our MO. And we usually watch a newer film and then compare it with an older film to just give ourselves something to talk about ad nauseum for you to listen to later on.
Because that's what the world needs, really. It needs more random opinions from middle-aged men.
Yes.
Yep.
More podcasts.
Thank God we're providing that.
We should do a popcorn counter sometime about more and more podcasts.
Yes. That's genius. Brilliant. It's back to school again then, isn't it? This episode. I suppose we are probably the leading school-situated film-related podcast.
I think we are.
So we have watched Teachers Lounge 2023, still mopping up the Oscars contenders. So it was a nominee for Best International Feature at the Oscars this year. It lost out to Zone of Interest. But they're both German films. Nice to see Germany get represented on the international stage.
Yeah.
And then we're comparing it to
Sir with Love from 1967. Ooh, this is a good proper 60s film.
Yes. Oh my. Yeah. It's
so 60s.
Hard to imagine a more 60s film.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to remember the name of Austin Powers. That's it. Austin Powers, Eat Your Heart Out.
Yes. If only Austin Powers was a teacher in a teaching film in the 1960s, that would be great. The Spy Who Taught Me.
Oh, good. That's good. That's good. I'm having that.
Or To Spy with Love. I mean, they've got a couple options there.
I'll be pitching that next time I meet a producer in a lift. And they won't be able to hammer that lift button fast enough. So, first of all, let's have a talk about Teachers Lounge.
Yes.
Released last year, German title Das Lehrerzimmer. Directed by, I think it's Ilke Katak, but I'm quite prepared to be told I've mispronounced his name.
I love the way you've pronounced all the German thus far.
That's only because German is one of the few languages that you are not fluent in, so anything I say in German.
Well, doesn't he has that little cedilla under the C. Does that soften the C? It doesn't look like a German name to me, actually.
It doesn't. I wonder whether he may be Turkish or something like that.
Or
if this is a proper professional podcast, we probably would have found this out, wouldn't we, before we started recording?
Oops.
This I think is his third feature. He made a feature called Once Upon a Time ... Indian a Land. And another film called I Was, I Am, I Will Be. I have not seen either of those. I'm not sure they've even had much international release. This is the first time that he has come to any great prominence. The lead in the film, playing young teacher Carla Novak, is Leonie Benesch, who was in The White Ribbon, that Michael Haneke film in 2009. Although I suspect she was a child in that.
Very young. I watched the trailer for White Ribbon, and I could not believe how much she's changed in 15 years. She looks very different.
Ah, okay.
All grown up. She's all grown up, I think.
Right. I never saw that film, and I'm not a massive fan of Michael Haneke, so I don't regret it. Would you like me to start out by, filling you in on the story of the Teachers Lounge?
Please tell me a story.
So, Teachers Lounge. So this is a German drama set entirely in a school. So we follow Carla. She is a young Polish teacher in a German middle school, and she's a good teacher. She's empathic, she's patient, she's kind, she's firm when she needs to be. She's everything you would look for in a teacher, I reckon. But she has a very strong sense of right and wrong, and this is what gradually emerges as maybe the one thing that might be her undoing. So we first see her. She's on the phone to some unknown party. This is like our opening image. And then she's called away to a meeting with some other teachers. They're asking 2 class reps about some thefts that are going on at the school. She takes the kids' side and she tells the kids, you don't have to say anything. But shortly after this interview, her class is effectively raided. The girls are sent out. The boys' wallets are searched. One boy is falsely accused of stealing money. When the truth comes out, Paula is furious on his behalf. She thinks he's been victimized, and she thinks maybe this is racial profiling. The kid is from probably a Turkish background. So, after watching one of her own fellow teachers stealing change from the coffee machine honesty box, and after stopping a boy in her own class cheating in an exam, Paula sets up an experiment. In the beautifully appointed teacher's lounge in her beautifully appointed German middle school, fantastic building, she leaves her laptop open with the webcam recording, leaves her wallet in a jacket, and then goes out of the lounge, comes back later and finds that not only has she had cash stolen from her purse, wallet, little money bag, but she has caught at least some of the details of the thief on camera. But what she does with this information and this footage is what leads to, I think, what we will call a spiral of unintended consequences and gradually worsening outcomes for everyone involved.
Ooh, I love that spiral of unintended consequences.
It's I was trying to figure out that classic screenwriter question, which we often ask, what's this film about? And I sort of ummed and ahed a little bit, and I wrote down a few suggestions, and I think I've come to the conclusion the theme of this film is the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Ooh, that's good.
Because I think that kind of is what it is, isn't it? I think that its sort of fundamental theme emerges again and again. I mean, some other suggestions I said, maybe it's that she who lives by the rules dies by the rules. Maybe it's judge not, lest ye be judged. And there is some business with a Rubik's Cube, which comes early in the movie and then it returns later in the movie. And I was wondering whether maybe this is trying to suggest that life is a kind of puzzle. And if you work hard enough, there can be a solution. But I don't think that is what the film is saying. I think it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Did you enjoy it?
I felt underwhelmed by this film. I think it's about bad salaries for teachers. I think the message I got was we need to pay teachers more so that they're not stealing coffee money from a piggy bank.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Because that's what gets the whole ball rolling downhill fast. And if they just paid the teachers more, then she wouldn't be recording the teacher's lounge in the first place. Film over. And I was surprised that Germans underpaying their teachers. I was very disappointed to see that.
The film seems otherwise extremely well resourced, doesn't it? So it's surprising whether the teachers are scrimping and saving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole film is set in the school. We never really get much insight into their home lives.
Precisely.
It would have been interesting to see, what is Paula's apartment like?
Yeah.
Is she able to drive to school or does she have to get the bus? Or, maybe that's a little bit of a mystery. But then she is the kind of character who would try and do the right thing. She wouldn't steal a loaf of bread to feed her family. She's that kind of character, isn't she? I think she would do the right thing at the cost of all other considerations.
Did you call her Paula or Carla? I think she's Carla.
Oh, is it? I've already typed it wrong in my notes. I think it is Carla. Yes.
Carla,
Oh, dear.
A little confused.
I'm going to claim that is an autocorrect error, and
Yes.
I blame Google.
Of course it is. Cars are for driving. Pauls and Paulas are for people. I'm glad you brought up the bit about really never leaving the school, because that's exactly what happens. I think, with the exception of one scene on a bridge over a river, you're really on campus the whole time, and I think that just limits the film entirely. I
think they do their best with their location, and it is a pretty cinematic school.
Yes,
and interestingly, the film is shot in 4:3. What I pretentiously refer to as the Academy ratio, which I think is undersubscribed and actually rather beautiful cinematic photographic ratio. It is beautifully filmed. A lot of very shallow focus shots, really kind of making you pay attention just to characters' eyes or faces. Mm-hmm. But it's not a movie of broad vistas, is it?
No, it's not.
Everything happens is enclosed within a couple of walls. It's it's a very interior film.
Yep. And as a result, you're absolutely right about, we don't know much about Carla. There's this little bit about she speaks Polish with another teacher, but they don't want to speak Polish in front of the German-speaking teachers because that might rouse suspicion or something like that. We don't really know much of her past. She comes from Westphalia, which I guess was a Polish-speaking part of Germany. But you don't really know much about her life. You assume that she's a new teacher because I think she's come in to replace another teacher. But you don't have a lot of information, so it really is all about what happens there. And exposition is always a delicate balance. I think we needed more in this film. It would have helped, and it would have given the filmmakers in the story a few more options about some other things happening, because it is pretty focused on her interpretation of other people's actions in the school. So she is probably in every scene, or nearly so. And it's just, there's not a lot of variety, I guess. It's kind of like one thing. It is sort of this thing of unspiraling, as you said. Just one thing getting undone by another, and it's a decent story. But as I said, I was not overwhelmed by the film. I think it's well done. It's perfectly competent filmmaking, but it just wasn't super interesting to me. And maybe it's because I lived that crap day in, day out.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, this is going to be one of my questions. Yeah. Is, how realistically do you feel it shows the life of the modern teacher?
I don't know how realistic it is. I mean, the school newspaper stuff, which we haven't talked about, didn't feel very real at all. There are a lot of issues there. I mean, so much of I'll tell you how it's different. Most of that stuff for me now happens out of the school and online. A lot of the crap between students, there's whole other worlds that I know nothing about, and I'm happy to know nothing about. But I really feel for the directors of the school, because they have to watch stuff online, and occasionally they're even listening to kids' podcasts. And you thought it was bad willfully listening to our podcast. Imagine trying to listen to a teenager's podcast about how they just disrespect other people in school all the time. So a lot of that happens. Most of the controversial stuff happens online. So it's not really in our building. There are very few fights these days. There's some obnoxious behavior in the restrooms and stuff. But the stealing, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it happens, but I don't see it very much, and I don't hear it very much. And then we have a pretty unified group of teachers, so we wouldn't argue about things like that. And the other thing is, you go to your union rep immediately. I mean, you don't get involved directly to the principal if something like that is happening. You make sure you've got your union representation.
Right, yeah. But then that is part of Carla's downfall, isn't it? Is leaping straight in and not getting back up.
Yeah, and I think so. Yeah, as you said. Road to Hell being paved with good intentions. She feels like a very young teacher, so it's very authentic in that way, and she makes a lot of mistakes that if she'd been around for a little longer, she wouldn't have made. But all those other teachers are also just giving her bad advice and treating her poorly. That was a very interesting angle, I thought. When they want her footage to see if they've been robbed as well. And the truth of the matter is that she has very little footage. It definitely shows a culprit, and it gives you the idea that she's been stolen from, but it's actually not that clear. What we see as viewers of the film is not that clear. And that was a plot point that I felt was really clunky. Like some of the teachers turn on her for not sharing the footage, whereas the footage really tells you very little, if anything. You know, it's 30 seconds of someone's shirt very close to Carla's jacket and her bag or whatnot. So there's this assumption that she's been robbed, but it doesn't really help any of the other teachers. And it's legally, they wouldn't ask for it either because she's not really even supposed to have it. So,
I mean, I interpreted the other teachers asking for the footage being that they wanted to see, well, have I been caught on this? Have I been doing something?
Yeah.
The idea being that actually, well, you know, maybe some of the teachers are kissing and canoodling at the back of the teachers' lounge when no one is around and thinking, well, you know, what else are we going to uncover? Yeah. And it's, you know, interesting that the film doesn't go down that route. I agree that there are not very many events in this film, but it's not a long film.
No. Yep.
And I think it's a bit of a slow burn. If I had to describe what genre this film is in, I mean, I called it a drama, but it carries it wears the suit of a thriller, doesn't it? It's tense and suspenseful. It's full of kind of pent up emotion. You know, a small number of I think pretty well drawn characters, a small number of interesting ideas, and you know, a lot of it is about just that kind of feeling of dread and rising tension. I think it does that, you know, very effectively. Shall we ring the spoiler bell, and then we can be a little bit more liberal about the juicy material from the second half of the movie?
Yes, ring it.
No, it's the wrong kind of bell, isn't it? It should be one of those school bells that tells the kids it's time for lunch. But I'm afraid we're just going to ring our old-fashioned bell. I spent all this money on it. I'm going to stick to it. Yeah, see, that's what school bells should be like. I think they should send a 7-year-old up a tower to ring a bell like that. That will make the kids pay attention.
You're ahead of your time, man. That's the school bell of the future.
I have one very specific complaint about this film, and I think maybe you can guess what it's going to be, which is that this is not the first time during recent podcasting we've had this problem. This film doesn't have an ending.
That's partly true. It has more of an ending than the ones that we've complained about, I think, but it is a bit unsatisfying, yes.
It doesn't maybe necessarily leave you dangling the way that Anatomy of a Fall did a couple of weeks ago, but it does. I'm not sure that it's, for my satisfaction, ties up any particular strand very well. There is a proper plot here about some thefts, and then someone who is accused, and the threat of a possible court case. 2 different people are suspended. Maybe Carla is going to be disciplined for making this video. There's all these kind of implications, but none of those things come to a conclusion. We don't really find out whether the staff member who's accused of stealing, is she going to get a job back, or is she not? Is it going to be swept under the carpet? Is it going to go to court? None of that is so that's not the ending that the film gives. So you kind of think, well, is there a kind of a character journey? Is it that she starts out as naive, but is brought to a realization by the events in the film? I'm not entirely convinced that there is a proper character journey either, though. But when we get to the very, very end of the film, we have Carla, who is in the classroom, just sitting on her own with Oscar, who is the son of the woman who is accused of stealing, and he himself has been excluded from school. He solves the Rubik's Cube that she gave him earlier, and then we get like a few shots, I think, of some empty rooms at the school, and then to the sound of Mozart, I think, Oscar is carried out of the school on a chair because he's suspended and he refuses to leave the building. So some people turn up and they carry him out on a chair, and he looks a little bit like a medieval king in a sort of a parade being carried out of the building. And then kind of that's it. And I was left kind of questioning, well, have we got a conclusion to any part of the film in that? I'm not convinced that we are. But you may take a more mature view of it than I do, though.
I don't. I think you wrapped it up perfectly. Yeah, I mean, my assumption is that she goes on to teach. She's learned something, but you're right. It's not like a particularly dramatic character arc. He gets expelled, and there's this ambiguity about whether he's a hero and he's being escorted out. Maybe his resistance is going to change some of the policies in the school. I don't think that's it. I think it's more that he was just so reluctant to leave school on his own. That I think they're police officers or guards that come in and actually carry him out. Yeah, and he does look like he might be a pharaoh or royalty being escorted out on a what would you call that? I want to say a stretcher or a gurney type thing. I'm sure there's a better word for it. But yeah, there's a little ambiguity in that. But that is the closing image. So we've talked a lot about opening and closing images, and this film totally breaks the rules. She's on a telephone, making a call that we have no idea what's going on. She's getting a phone number or something, and it might be for this English. They've got this field trip to England that's going to happen, but that wasn't clear at all. And then the closing image is him, completely different character being escorted out. So there's really no connection between the beginning and the end. And that sort of plays into the whole idea that, the arcs aren't quite there or tidy. And the ending is ambiguous. That doesn't really help us. I think that's a big, okay. So now that you've mentioned it, I am going to vent a little bit on this.
Oh, good. Oh, vent away.
It just doesn't give us, you could get away with an ambiguous ending, I suppose, if it's this glorious shot that really has some sort of standalone meaning. But I think it does confuse us a little bit as to what his role is at the end. Is he a character who's going to get vengeance for his mother? Is he a character that's just a sacrificial lamb being carried off? There's ambiguity there, and it doesn't tie to Carla's story very well. And we have to assume, yes, she's going to be back in teaching, but she'll be that much better because she's mature because of these difficult experiences. But you're right. A couple of closing shots of empty classrooms tells you something different. It tells you, maybe the whole school's going to get shut down or something like that. They did have to clear the campus, I think, right? She had to clear her room in order to get Oscar out of there. So it's kind of like there's a lot of temporary stuff there, but there's not a lot of permanent stuff there. So I was underwhelmed. I didn't, walk away from viewing this film thinking about it very much or being very pleased or very impressed. But I also, at the same time, I wasn't deeply disappointed because I felt like this is a very average, competently made film whose story just didn't give me a whole lot to grab onto.
Right. Yep. I mean, it reminds me again of what we said about Anatomy of a Fall, which is that it seems like, perfectly well-made, fairly low-budget European film, the sort of thing which would get, international distribution and be seen in a few art house theatres and be kind of, and you'd, give it a nod and a smile, and then it would turn up on the DVD shelf of on the kind of international section in your local shop. But I'm not sure that I would necessarily rush to put this on the list of best international features at the Oscars. But it's not bad.
It's not bad.
I enjoyed it. It's not bad. It's good.
The Academy really got it right with Zone of Interest, which just stands way above those two films by comparison. So I think, there's a little silver lining right there, is that I think these films are not deserving of being the best foreign film this year. And the one that won, I think, did deserve it. So there's a good difference there. For me, there was like one money shot in the whole film, which is this scene where she's starting to feel very unsure about her decision to come out with the video and inadvertently get the secretary, Mrs. Q, and Oscar's mother fired. And it's the whole plot point is basically this shirt that she's wearing, a very very distinct shirt when she's caught on video, Mrs. Kuhn is. And then Carla, when she's just flipping out, she starts seeing everybody in the school wearing this same shirt. And it's really, it's a lovely moment that captures her panic and her fear and her regret. And everyone, teachers, students, I don't know how they did this on the budget, or if they just had everyone wear green and then put the shirt on them through CGI. But it's a great scene. And I can't say that there are too many scenes like that in the film. There's some scenes that work on like intense dialogue or some closed spaces and tension in the classrooms, but that scene really stands out as being sort of the best composed sort of money shot for the film.
And it's kind of a bit of a change in tone, isn't it? Because it's the only time when you see something which is exclusively Carla's POV and not happening in the real world.
Yeah.
She has a bit of a panic attack, doesn't she, earlier on? And it just sort of feeds into this idea that maybe she's kind of unsure of herself and of the world around her. I must say, rather than green screen it, I reckon the way that the special effects wizards might have shot that scene is by going to the local shop and buying 30 blouses, I reckon.
Yeah,
I think just what they might have done. But
putting them on various people. Because she walks in both directions and it's very well done. It's a great use of wardrobe, I guess.
Yeah.
30 shirts, yeah. But I don't know what store would you could not possibly sell 30 of those shirts. It's a pretty ugly shirt. It has, is it like a bamboo pattern, but it has either a flower or like a orange type fruit hanging off of it. It's, no one's going to buy that. So I'm leaning towards green screen because I don't think anyone would produce such an ugly shirt.
Oh, they do things differently in Germany, I think.
They could have had a good seamstress, I guess, make 30 of those shirts. But it's clever. It stands out. It's a fabric that stands out for its ugliness.
I think I enjoyed the film more than you, although, I didn't think it was top 10 material, but I did enjoy it, and it did keep me riveted. They do at least make use of some good visual storytelling, even though it's in this kind of quite boxy ratio and it's a very interior story. There is still a lot of good scenes that happen without dialogue. The scenes where she's uncovering the thief, and she just sets up her laptop and then she goes for a little walk and she comes back, and that's all without dialogue, and it's nicely played. Or the scene that you alluded about Oscar, he breaks into an office, smashes the window, steals the laptop, and at no point does anybody say, "That's my laptop. He's stealing it. Stop him. There he goes through the door," which many lesser films would have exactly done. These are scenes by a director who knows how to tell a story. They're purely visual storytelling moments, and I think they're very effective. The tone of the film as a suspense thriller, I think this is backed up by two things I would point out. One is, I think, great music.
Yeah.
This kind of got this very, very simple theme where I think it's just like a single plucked note on a violin, which is just repeated, just this single repeated note. It must have taken less time to write the score than it did to actually perform the score. But I think it really, really works. One of those, great examples of, keep it simple, stupid, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then the end of the movie, I guess kind of the third act, when Oscar, who is supposed to be excluded from the school, he is the kid who's stolen the laptop and he's smashed Carla in the face with it, and then he's comes back to the school and sits sullenly in the classroom when he's not supposed to be there in the building. Now, tell me if I am way off, but when he turns up and he's kind of wearing a hoodie and he's looks like a very, very bulky backpack with him, and I was assuming that this was going to become a school shooting scenario. But do you think, is that what the audience is intended to think, or am I way off base there?
I think I willingly thought that because I wanted it to be a bit more exciting than I knew it was going to be. So I would never pray for a gun in school, but in this film, I think I did think that they were trying to lead us to that notion. It's a German school, so I don't know if there have been many German school shootings or anything like that. But when he comes in with a bag like that. And for me, we don't have a police officer in our school anymore. We used to. And I just know that the principals would have been on that bag and going through it in seconds. And he would have been escorted out of there a lot faster than he was. So that was, they're taking liberties with what would probably be standard operating procedure, at least here. Again, in Germany, I don't know, but they would have been going through that bag. And I think, the bag is a setup for the Rubik's Cube, which it's not a massive payoff. She's given him that Rubik's Cube in Act 1. Taught him how to do one side, and then, the big moment is when he can do the Rubik's Cube in front of her and pass it back to her. And I think you're right. It's about, complicated situations there. You just have to keep working on them and you can figure out the puzzle. Is that worth getting the audience to think he's going to shoot up the school? I don't know. I mean, that for me is a pretty weak payoff that just, it did lead us down. It was wrong footing us, taking us down this horrific idea where we thought ugliness was really going to happen, and it ends up being, again, kind of an underwhelming thing. And for me, from my teaching experience, completely unrealistic because he wouldn't have been in there for more than 2 minutes. So,
when I was at school, we certainly didn't have any kind of police constable in the school. What we had was Mr. Peters, who was one of the history teachers, who was a relatively softly spoken man, which every boy in the school was absolutely terrified of. Yeah. The moment that Mr. Peters came into the room, everyone would just kind of sit up straight in their chair and shut up. He had this amazing disciplinary charisma. If Mr. Peters was at this school, there would have been no kicking off. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, this is a medical question more than anything else, probably.
Yes.
When Carla has these panic fits, she can't breathe, and she goes into the bathroom and she She empties whatever was in the trash can, and then she puts this plastic bag over her mouth, and she breathes in and breathes out. And we see that in films all the time. That could be pre-cliche material for the squad right here now.
Yeah.
Is there any, and I'll jump ahead. I tried this to see if it really works the night after I saw the film, but is there any medical truth to using that as a practice to calm yourself down?
I'm going to disappoint you here and say yes.
Yeah, okay.
At least insofar as if you have a panic attack, then people often tend to hyperventilate. So they are, preparing to run away from a bear or, initiate that fight or flight response. So people hyperventilate, and once you hyperventilate too much, you end up breathing out so much carbon dioxide that you then make yourself a little bit alkalotic, which then can make you feel very dizzy, and you get tingling in your fingertips. So the way to restore the normal level of carbon dioxide in your blood is to breathe in and out of, I wouldn't say a plastic bag. You know what? I think that's probably asking for trouble. Yeah. So a paper bag is what we would suggest. Breathing in and out of a paper bag. You think about your breathing, so you have something to concentrate on, and also you're going to be rebreathing some of your exhaled breath, so you will increase the level of carbon dioxide back to the normal level in your circulation. Does it work? Is there a peer-reviewed scientific paper that proves that it will reduce your anxiety? Probably not, but it's still what we advise people to do now. Yeah, so that was reasonable. I thought that was reasonable.
Excellent.
That was quite a touching moment, actually.
And that's not the kind of stuff you get on any other podcast, Here, we give you helpful information. And as I said, I tested it because I was laughing so hard the other night in a restaurant that I had to calm myself down. So I just sort of tucked my face into my shirt and I started breathing in and out, just trying to trap some of my exhalations and bring them back in. And it worked. I got back to my senses in no time. So don't tell the cliche squad about that. They don't need to know.
But now that you've mentioned the cliche squad, they have turned up. Maybe we should ask them whether there's anything else that they would like to investigate.
I set you up for that. Jeez.
Cliche squad.
I didn't even know I was doing it.
As far as I'm concerned, we've already established I enjoyed this film more than you. So I'm only going to ask for a caution from the cliche squad, which is the cliche of the scary, preternaturally mature, rather precocious teenagers on the school newspaper.
Yeah.
I saw that. So there's a scene where Carla is interviewed by these very, very self-possessed teenagers who publish a school newspaper. And those kids are the Midwich Cuckoos, aren't they? They are so aloof and confident and unshakable and absolutely terrifying. But they are too organised and too self-possessed to really be believable, I think. I mean, you've rightly pointed out there are a number of not quite believable elements in this film, but that's the one that stood out to me.
Yeah.
But after you were talking about the scene with the 30 blouses walking up and down the corridors, it does occur to me, are the kids really like that, do you think? Or maybe that's just how Carla sees them, and we're getting another kind of subjective viewpoint again. So maybe it should only be a caution from the cliche squad.
I think the way it's filmed, they are really like that. In that scene, she's seen a lot. We don't really see her point of view of the students so much as she's almost been being interrogated. She's surrounded. Sometimes they're behind her, they're walking around her. A couple of them are seated right across the table from her. So she's definitely the center of attention and not the person who sees all the things happening around her. But it's a good point. Yeah, cautionary. Absolutely. That's a good caution.
Have you got anything else for the cliche squad?
Well,
before they get back in the car?
We talked about the Rubik's Cube a little bit. It doesn't have to be a Rubik's Cube, but there's always this one thing that a teacher starts to show a student early in a film, and then it comes back at the end. Oh, they've mastered it. She's a great teacher. So it's a metaphor for sorting out a complicated situation, but it's kind of ironic because this case, because of the video, the whole case that drives the story is characterized as an open and shut case. So it's it kind of plays with the intentions a little bit, which I think is pretty wise, actually. But I think we've seen Rubik's Cubes before. We should really sometimes interview someone from the cliche squad to see what they think about these films, and have they seen the Rubik's Cube before? The other one's a little depressing for me. It's kind of true, but there is this cliche that teachers have no exterior life whatsoever.
Oh.
And we are focused on school, and we work hard, but it's not school and school only. As you get to be a more veteran teacher, you realize there's a lot of crap that you don't have to pay much attention to. So we do have rich exterior lives. It's not just in the school that we exist. So that I think that's something of a cliche, and we see it in both films this week. And it was one of the first things you mentioned in this podcast. So I definitely, it's palpable. It's right there. She's never outside of the building. We don't know where she lives. Does she commute? Does she have any friends? It's really just about her and the other teachers in the school as teachers only.
As far as that Rubik's Cube thing goes, I mean, there is a scene where they flirt with, I think, a much better metaphor. The children give this little presentation about eclipses.
Yep.
And there's this kind of speech about, so the unpredictable became predictable, and the idea of things being revealed or things being shadowed. I felt like that was much riper for a more interesting kind of bit of metaphor, whereas the Rubik's Cube, I agree, is a little bit sort of, this again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I mentioned that in my notes also, that it's also this bit about using facts and science to actually determine something as opposed to just conjecture and just jumping to conclusions based on what you see or have heard. So that was that's a nice little bit.
But then if they'd emphasised that more, we would just be complaining about it, wouldn't we? So I suppose we should be pleased that they were subtle with that bit.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Cliche squad, get back in the squad car. We should have a break. I feel like I should do that cute clapping thing that middle school teachers do. Everybody pay attention. We're going to have a 5-minute recess. And then we will come back to class with a look at To Serve with Love.
James, perhaps something like this has happened to you recently.
Oh dear, what are you going to say now?
Well, hear me out. See if we have the same kind of life experiences. You're in a restaurant.
Right.
The ambiance is great. There's low lighting, chatter all around. The smells of the magnificent food you're about to eat are already in the air. And then the menu comes. Not only is the menu in 8-point font, but there's so little light that you can't read a thing. And then inevitably, at our age, all those reading glasses start coming up and popping out onto noses, on the faces of these withered middle-aged people all around you, and you've forgotten yours.
Yep,
Does that sound familiar to
me? Oh, yes.
So lucky for me, this happens to me a lot, but recently I was very lucky because one of my dining companions had the solution to my problems right there in her pocket. And the good people at Insight had the insight, and now they have a sponsorship with Two Real Cinema Club. The solution is, surprise, surprise, a pill. I ingested just one Insight, and within minutes my pupils had dilated to the point where I could read the menu of the restaurant next door. Insight puts you at ease in such stressful moments because it offers eye-opening experience and relaxation properties. I don't know what's in it, but I felt a little trippy, minor hallucinations, but great vision and calm. They assured me, the people at Insight and our lawyers, that there's nothing illegal in Insight, in most states and territories anyway. And the food tasted so good when it finally came. Time just stood still. Sounds great, right?
When the Insight arrived, did you eat it as a tablet, or did you snort it as a white powder?
Funny you should ask. There is a snortable version, but mine was in full tablet form. It sounds great, but there's more. Insight also makes Insight Inside. So similar to Insight, but Insight Inside includes one of those little micro cameras. So it's a visual health checkup that accompanies your meal. You just scan the Insight Inside pill to activate the Insight app on your telephone. Ingest the pill, then enjoy what you were able to order thanks to Insight, but track its progress from ingestion to expulsion via Insight Inside. It's the complete take-in, take-out, that's takeaway in the United Kingdom. It's the complete take-in, take-out experience. Now, as you can imagine, you're a doctor. There are some side effects, but every body is different, right? We all have different chemistry within ourselves. Some Insight and Insight Inside users have experienced blurriness, lack of focus and attention span, temporary and permanent blindness, complete strangers asking, "Are you all right?" Nausea and nausea, or both, depending on where you live, constipation, diarrhea. Why does that have 2 R's in it? I've never spelled diarrhea correctly. Vertigo, death, intoxication, and insatiable hunger pangs. But
why is death tucked in as one of the least important sounding side effects?
Ask our lawyers. I don't know. The benefits are flipping cool, so go for it. So, Two Real Cinema and Dining Club members. Did you know there's a Two Real Dining Club now?
Oh.
Here's the motto. Get insight. Get insight.
Oh, that's good.
Could be good. It'll definitely pep up your next dinner, that's for sure.
I've lost count of the number of times I've gone out for dinner, and the thing I've most wanted was a live video feed of my own restaurant.
Count no more. You can count on insight. Been that word.
Is that right? Do I pass the audition? Can I be your drummer?
I think because of the ocean in between us, it sounds a little weird, but I bet you were a good student in school.
Now everybody in the house who's gone to bed now is going to think, what's going on down there? What's he doing? I thought he was just recording a podcast.
Why are people clapping? They're clapping because we're about to talk about To Sir with Love from 1967.
1967. Oof. Was there ever a more 60s film?
No, I don't know. I don't know if there was. It's James Clavell. But I guess it's Australian. I didn't really know his nationality before this.
Yeah.
Is that where New South Wales is? I think it's Australia, yeah?
Yeah.
He apparently wrote and directed this film. I always think of him as just being the guy who wrote that big long book, or that series of 4 long books. But he made some films, and he worked with a writer named E.R. Brathwaite, whose entire career, as far as I can tell, and he lived up to 104 years
of
age. It seems to be that he wrote not once, not twice, but thrice To Sir with Love. There are versions of this for television in the 70s, and then there was another version in the 1990s, and I think Sidney Poitier was in that one as well.
Oh,
what a career! And he's got no other IMDb credits that I saw. And I don't know how much he rewrote for those other versions, but he gets credit for all 3 of those. So
now, is it just that all 3 of those are based on? So E.R. Brathwaite wrote a novel called To Sir with Love.
Yeah, it sounds like it's from. And I'm assuming you read it this week for the podcast.
God, I must disappoint you again. It's not very long, actually. I did check it out. But I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint the Two Real Book Club once again. I'm afraid yet again I haven't completed my homework, and I didn't read the book this week.
Okay.
I did do a little bit of research, and I learned that apparently E.R. Brathwaite, he said in an interview with BBC Radio 4 in 2007, he said, "I detest the movie from the bottom of my heart." So apparently he hated this adaptation.
Hated it so much that he made money off it 2 more times. Oh, poor E.R.
I hate this, he said, as he ran to the bank, cashing a check. But James Clavell also, I didn't realise that he had written scripts for other projects as well. He wrote the script for The Fly, the 1958 version. Yeah. And he wrote the script for The Great Escape. What a career.
Yeah. I think he was born in the 20s. So it's the funny thing about this film is that he's probably in his mid or late 40s when he writes and directs this. And I feel like he's too old for it already. I mean, this film is like about the 60s kids, you know, the hip Londoners. And it feels like it's made by someone who's a square. Oh my God, he's a square. That's what he is. So it's an interesting take. So it's funny because I have very fond memories. I know you haven't asked me why about this film, but
I'm going to interrupt you now so I can play the jingle.
Okay,
tell me, you chose this film, but why did you choose it?
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
I think in part on personal nostalgia. It's just one of those films that was on cable television when I was growing up. It would have been about like 10 or 12 years old. So late 70s, 80s. I've probably seen bits and pieces of this film 10 times, and I haven't seen it in maybe 10 or 20 years. But so there's a certain level of personal nostalgia. And then when we saw the Teacher's Lounge, I was thinking, yeah, educator, making a difference, fish out of water,
yes,
and that 60s feel. So I figured this would be a good match. And Sidney Poitier is definitely a fish out of water, but I'm glad he's in whatever he's in. He's in the air or maybe in a different bit of water, because this film would not be very good at all without Sidney Poitier. I think he makes a big, big difference in this film.
Yes.
Shall I tell you more?
Why don't you tell us the story?
I'll tell you the first little bit. We're going to cut me off soon because we can spoil it together. Features Sidney Poitier as Mark Thackeray, Judy Geeson as Pamela Dare, one of his students, Susie Kendall as Gillian Blanchard, one of the fellow teachers there, another new teacher. Both she and Mark Thackeray, played by Sidney Poitier, are sort of new teachers to this school for some of the hardest to educate or some of the toughest kids in the city. It seems like they've been rejected from other schools. And one of the key students in Thackeray's class is Christian Roberts, playing Denham. He just has the name Denham. I assume that's his last name, but it's appropriate. He seems to wear a lot of like blue jean material, so I guess they called him Denham. This film does, I think, have a key opening and closing scene. We see a man getting on buses. We're not even sure that it's Sidney Poitier and his character at the very beginning, but he's taking seems like bus after bus to get to a location. And he meets some true Londoners on the bus, and he's sort of seen as this sexual object by some of the local ladies. They go on and on about his handsomeness, which is very kind of important, probably too important in this film, in my imagination.
I found that opening sequence on the bus absolutely hilarious. Rachel and I watched it, laughing out loud constantly during that scene. In fact, any time that East London lady would turn up, she runs a market stall as well. She's just hilarious.
She's very funny. That's very much a caricature, but I was actually a little shocked. I didn't remember her coming back later on as she works at one of the stalls in a farmer's market or a open air market. But she really has the hots for Sidney Poitier when they're on the bus together.
But who wouldn't?
He finally arrives at a school where he will work. He's met by this veteran teacher, Thea Weston, who delivers like one unsubtle racial slur after another. But it's all in received pronunciation, so it's okay, I guess. He immediately calls him a black sheep headed for the lambs for slaughter. And that's just the beginning. I'll give you all of his slurs as we go along. Basically, there's no corporal punishment in this school. They make that very clear, even though the students are a little unruly. And Thackeray meets them sort of at lunch. They're playing records in maybe a gymnasium or something like that. And he's been told that they're all rejects from other schools. He eventually gets them into class. I think the first day he's not there as a teacher, but he's replacing a teacher who has, I guess, just become too fed up with the students, so he leaves the job and leaves Thackeray to come in. Thackeray has this engineering background. He's worked in South America as an engineer, and he's still sort of looking for a job and putting letters in the mail constantly to try and drum up a new job. So we have this idea, this is a very temporary thing. He gets to know the students in part by having them read excerpts in class of their favorite readings, and a lot of them really struggle with reading. Pamela is a star, well, she's a dim star in a black hole of students, and she reads an excerpt. And whenever you get material from students, it means something. So we were talking about the eclipse earlier and how that was explained by the students in the Teacher's Lounge. She reads, she's reading a poem of some sort, and she says, "In him glowed when all about him ceased to glow." And we are talking about the man they will eventually call Sir. That is Mark Thackeray, the Poitiers character. So Thackeray begins to see that these kids are coming from tough homes, violent homes. This is very similar to the Journey and Teacher's Lounge, too. This is another one. Theo Weston, this guy. Veteran teacher. He's obviously just kind of a disgruntled, grizzled old guy. He wonders if his dear old coolie friend, is that okay? Oh, my God. Can work some black magic or some of his voodoo to learn the kids something. I mean, he's just constantly dropping these little racist remarks.
I think in 1967 it was kind of okay. I think you could say those sorts of things in public.
And I think, obviously race is in this. He's a fish out of water because he's not really American. I guess he comes from American Guyana or something like that, which I'm not.
Yeah, I guess British Guyana.
Guyana. So he's got a history, and then Poitiers himself was from the Caribbean somewhere. I forget where he was from originally. But he taught in California. He's working with these very different students. He's the only, there's a black student in the class named Seals, and Thackeray connects with him, and he realizes this kid's struggling at home, and he realizes all of them have terrible home lives, and he's challenged by the position he's taken on. He's losing sleep, and he continues to send out letters to get an engineering job, but ultimately, he's kind of refusing the call in the storyteller's language, but he accepts the call, and then he discovers that the ladies in one day in class, they're burning sanitary napkins in the classroom stove. Which we would.
And I was going to ask you: is that what they were burning? I think it's heavily implied,
yes,
but never stated out loud.
Never stated out loud. And I've seen this film a lot, and from a very young age, it was told to me that was what I think my sister said. That's what was happening, and then it can't be anything else. I don't think. I mean. But
the film is so coy about it, isn't it?
Yeah, he sends the boys out of the room and then slut shames the girls a little bit. And he just finally realizes that they're just kids. And it's his mission to transform them from kids into young adults in the remaining time he has with them. So he pitches the textbooks to the rubbish bin. And then they begin to talk about and learn about, the greatest curriculum of them all, life.
I'm guessing. Are we about to ring a spoiler bell?
Yes, spoiler.
Before we do, I'm gonna ask you a simple question with a numerical answer.
Oh, okay.
How old are the children in this class?
17 turning 18.
I'm pretty sure they are 16.
Oh my God!
I think these kids are 16 in this film, about to leave school.
Ooh.
Wow. And they are the most 30-year-old looking 16-year-olds you could imagine, aren't they? It's,
Yes.
Pretty amazing. I think people did look a bit older, though, in those days.
Probably.
I think people aged faster.
Yeah.
But they really, really don't look 16.
No, not at all.
Even when they have their hair in bunches towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
They're doing their very best to youth them up.
So they're not, they're not destined for further study. So you figure they're doing the minimum amount of,
I think so, yeah.
Public education or private state education. So yeah, I guess 16 then. Wow. Well, that makes it even creepier because I think this film takes a turn that I don't agree with, and I conveniently didn't remember it that well. So spoil it. Yeah, you can ring a bell.
Okay, let's ring the bell. School bell, here it comes. I was going to say it sounds a little bit more like a British school bell. I don't know whether it really does.
I think that's appropriate for this one.
Well, speaking of appropriate...
or inappropriate.
Or inappropriate, yes. So before we carry on with the second half of the story, I'm going to make a couple of sort of general observations, which is... so James Clavell, was better known as a novelist than a filmmaker. And this film, I've written in my notes here, it is blocked like a play. It has lots of people who are standing in lines facing the audience. I really don't think James Clavell knows where to put the camera. So it is a kind of in many ways, it's a kind of a stagily staged film.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he's very good with the close-ups.
Yeah.
And so I think he knows when to move for a close up, and the actors he's got take some great close ups.
Yeah.
So it's not all bad, but it's not a film where the photography leaps out at you. And I don't know whether I would say it's a particularly skillfully directed film.
No, I don't think so at all. I'm glad you mentioned the word photography, because the next scene is all about photography, and the film itself seems like a collection of photographs at times. And I'm glad you said what you did about blocking and camera position, because in some ways this film is definitely photographed. It's not cinema in that way. It's it looks like a collection of photographs, and Thackeray wants to take them on field trips. So the first one is to the Victoria and Albert, but I think this is just probably cheaper and easier. Instead of filming at a museum, they must have just gone along with a photographer, and they just take all these stills and make a montage out of the "To Sir with Love" song that we hear many times in the film. But it's a good one. It's a good song. So it's like a photo montage. It's not really a filmed scene. So we see the kids making a very quick arc in their character journeys. They're turning, really loving the new curriculum that Thackeray is bringing them. So he's.
And I think that scene of the stills. I wrote in my notes here, genius. I don't use that word very often. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, clearly it's done for the sake of economy.
Yeah.
That it costs a lot to shut the Victoria and Albert Museum for 2 days and then bring in some actors and some lights. And whereas if you just take your actors along, not even all of your actors, just take a few of your actors in costume and someone with a 35mm camera and just shoot some stills.
Yeah.
And what's very interesting, I thought, is clearly they're using a different lens for this still camera.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's something about, I don't know, it's a 50mm lens or whatever on the camera, which suddenly makes the whole film seem like a documentary. There's just this astonishing sense of realism. You're like really there in the real museum with the real people.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
For that section, it's remarkable.
It's funny that it comes alive more. The characters come alive more through still photographs. It's almost as if you're really looking through an album and remembering it with them. And it also allows the viewer's imagination to roam a little bit and say, okay, what was happening there and who was hanging out on that day in the museum. And it is brilliant. It's really simple.
I'm surprised that more films don't do exactly that, because I think it's so effective.
Yeah, it was quite effective. But one thing that's really odd is that, Poitier's character, Thackeray, is coming up with these, he's this rebellious teacher. He's going to do things differently, but he's really old-fashioned in the things that he's teaching them. He talks about marriage and dress. He wants the Gillian character to give the girls a lesson in makeup and hair. So it's just very funny that he is going to be revolutionary, but he's actually just instilling some very traditional values. And again, this is, I think, where it'd be nice to know about the book a little bit here, but I think this is where Clavel shows that he's kind of a different generation. He's not capturing the hipness or the youth in the characters. There's this one character, Denham, who we've mentioned, who just has not quite warmed up to Sir, as they're calling him now, and he needs to win him over. Then it's after the trip, on the bus, Gillian is suggesting that Pamela, one of the students who's 16 years old, is starting to crush on Sir. And Sir is not really resisting it too much either. He seems to smile a little bit too much. And I think this is, maybe I'm just becoming an old prude, but this was where this is where he focuses. Clavel focuses the story on this crush that the girl has on the older teacher. And I think that's kind of a mistake, because I think it'd be interesting to really show him teaching them more and more real stuff. I mean, like prepping a salad in class, that was a ridiculous scene, I thought. And it's, again, he's not really teaching them the modern things. He's teaching them the old conventions, and yet throwing in this angle on the crush between the teacher and the student is a little odd. What was your take?
Well, I thought the film already had a perfectly serviceable, quite sweet romantic subplot between Thackeray and Gillian.
Yeah.
And there's clearly some electricity there, and I thought that was kind of sweet. And she's interested, and he's probably interested, and they have a bit of chemistry, and I thought that was quite nice. And then this notion that that he should then sort of have to not really fight off this kind of 16-year-old Pamela who's making eyes at him. I agree. It just seems like it throws a bit of a spanner in the works. It's not entirely appropriate. But then this was 1967,
Yes,
wasn't it? When it was sort of a different world.
Yeah.
We've since learned an awful lot about the exploits of actors and rock stars in the 60s, which to a modern eye seem extremely inappropriate, and it makes kind of flirting with a 16-year-old seem almost chaste by comparison. So I think it's a product of a different time.
Yeah,
but it
does keep coming back though as a story point. So they don't let it go. It's not something that's just brief, but it starts basically at the beginning of the second act of the film and goes all the way really to the climax scene is part of that. So we'll get to that in a moment. I love this one scene that I just do want to talk about. It's a physical education scene in the gymnasium. The boys are doing the vault with the PE teacher, and this one overweight boy refuses to jump on the vault. He's scared. He doesn't think he can do it. And the teacher says, "Oh my God, you're a boy and a fat boy too." I love it. It's sort of like a means of inspiring him to get on the vault. And the other boys in the class stand up for him by saying, "Fats can't do it." Don't make him do it. Oh, it's hilarious because their defense of him is just equally offensive. But there's a clumsy...
Also, I mean, that kid, by 2024 standards, is not even overweight, is he?
No.
I don't know whether most of these East London kids were utterly emaciated.
Yeah.
They barely weighed 100 pounds each, whereas, they look very different these days.
It's a hilarious scene, and there's a clumsy collapse of the entire vault under Fats when he finally gets onto the vault, and it just falls apart underneath him, and that proves the boy's right. He can't do it. And then one student attacks the teacher. He was standing up for his friend, and this is the sort of thing the new students do. Before Thackeray got to them, they were rude and they disrespectful, and here now they really cover each other's backs, and they'll stand up for one another. So one of the boys goes after the teacher with a piece of the vault that had fallen apart, I guess. And Sir really does not like that, and it sort of drives some division between him and the students towards the third act. Was school like that for you? Did you guys do the vault?
Well, I remember having like a medicine ball. I think we did have but I feel like it was called a horse or something like that, wasn't it?
There's the pommel horse, which is the one with the two like half rings on it that you can grab onto, and then there's just the vault.
I don't think we had any half rings on ours.
Okay.
We did have this kind of strange leather-covered box on some stilts. All I can really remember at my school gym lessons was that there were 4 ropes that were suspended from the ceiling of the gym.
The ropes, yeah.
And Mr. White, who was our gym teacher, would get us all to try and climb to the very top of the rope. And obviously yours truly could barely make it 12 inches off the ground before collapsing back down again. And Ben Pease was the only boy in the class who could climb the rope. And so basically every gym lesson was us all standing in awe as Ben Pease climbed to the top of the rope and then climbed back down again. And that's my overriding memory of gym.
Well, the lessons in Sir's classes are very different. There's a boxing scene later where Thackeray and Dunham, this is sort of the final conflict between them. The setup is kind of ridiculous. They're boxing, but for some reason Dunham really wants to pair up with Sir. And so then all of a sudden there's this circle of students watching Thackeray and Dunham box one another, really actually hitting each other with gloves. It's for me, it was unbelievable. But again, this is 1967. Dunham takes a wicked uppercut to the gut from Sir, and he ends up respecting Sir for hitting him so well just the one time. Another kind of ridiculous scene in the gymnasium. But the love story then sort of just takes over until the very end when Pamela asks Sir to dance with her. They make this arrangement to dance at the final dance the day of. So that we know it's going to happen. And then, he definitely has affection for her too. It's a little bit pervy to say the least, but, and the worst part is it's a fairly vigorous dance. So they're breathing heavily at the end of the dance.
I mean, he's clearly enjoying it, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. So that's kind of where the film takes us. That's like the end journey. There's this great scene I think Tarantino would have loved, and he's ripped on this, the mind benders of this group playing 60s music. And the music in these films always seems to be I think what the older generation thinks of the music of the times. That's how they remember it. It's never something you hear on the radio today. It's always these little jazzy rock things, usually no words. And I don't know if it's patent issues where they can't actually use the real music, so they just start making this strange, noisy rock and roll stuff. But it very 60s kinds of stuff. The film ends up with Sir alone in a classroom. He's got an offer for an engineering job. He's going to leave the job, but then some ruffian students from his next term, they would be his students in the next term, they enter, and he realizes they are the next lot of folks that he needs to help. So he tears up the contract, which will suffer the same fate as the old textbooks, off to the bin with them, because now he's a master teacher.
I think, did we get like a freeze frame of him kind of ripping up the... It's like the end of an episode of a 1970s cop show or something like that. They will have a freeze frame ripping up the letter.
Case closed.
I must say, I mean, for all the kind of rather cheesy craziness, and I agree that I think the second half of the film is considerably more contrived than the first half.
Yeah.
I did enjoy this film, having never seen it before, and certainly not having seen it 12 times over, and seeing it kind of repeatedly on cable TV.
Yeah.
First time I've ever really been exposed to it. I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
I wrote a little note in my notebook here, which I said, this is my main criticism if I'm going to come up with one, which is that this film is like a 1 hour concert followed by an 8 hour after party. Yeah. I feel that that kind of Thackeray, he wins over the kids. Once he makes his decision, no, we're going to talk about life.
Yeah.
He wins over the kids, pretty quickly,
Yes.
and they have one excursion, and that's it. And it all comes pretty easy to him after
Very
that.
easy. Yeah.
And then a lot of the rest of the film is just sort of celebrating how great Mr. Thackeray is.
Yeah. Yep.
So it doesn't. I'm not going to say that it's unearned, but it feels disproportionate somehow. That,
Absolutely.
If the film were remade, you'd spend a little bit more time trying to win the kids over, and you'd have more waxing and waning, rather than it being a quick victory and then let's do the victory lap and then again and again and again.
Agreed entirely. I will see this film probably another 12 times. I love it. But, it's definitely not as good as I remember it, and I don't think it's a great film. It's very entertaining, and again, Sidney Poitier, fantastic, and he makes the film happen. But you're absolutely right. It seems like as soon as he gets in the classroom and ditches the books, they love him, and they start acting really maturely, and he makes them into better human beings. He's really showing them a different way of living. But it happens so fast, and that's what should be happening when they're focusing on this ridiculous love story and the crush. I mean, the crush would make more sense if it sort of comes in late and it's just a sort of little complication, and then over and done with. But it's just carried on, and it percolates up 1 or 2, 3 more times throughout the story, and it's not the right way to go. I think really the student's journey is a much better way to go. And you occasionally get a little glimpse into their lives outside. There's when Seals's mother dies, and there's this funeral, and the kids are raising money to get flowers, and this is their idea. They're putting it together. They're raising the money. They're going to take the flowers, but no one wants to go because his family's black, and they've never gone to his house, and they're worried about how it would seem. And they eventually there's a scene where he walks around the corner. He's going to go deliver the flowers, or at least go visit the family. And then he sees them. They're all dressed beautifully and smiling at him. And it's kind of awkward because there's no dialogue there, and they're just smiling, and he's smiling at them. And it's this moment of, okay, they've really arrived. They've really grown up. He's had a great effect on them. But again, that journey should have been harder, and that should have been the focus of getting them to that point in Acts 2 and 3. And that's not where the film really focuses, sadly.
I think there is one very important aspect of this film which we haven't mentioned yet, which I want to highlight, which is I think this film has an incredible sense of place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That I wrote here in my notes that the Route Master bus is one of the central characters in this film. Those double-decker buses, which have been phased out now. They were phased out about 20 years ago. But these buses where you could just hop on and off at the back of the bus without the bus even stopping. Yep. Great fun to ride, tremendously dangerous. No wonder they don't have them anymore. But the bus that zips across town and has that kind of recognizable silhouette, that's like a character in the film.
Yeah.
And the school as well. I was going to ask you, did you feel that the school... Was the school believable to you as someone who did not go to a British school?
As a small school for a certain clientele of student, and it looked like it was what we would call it like a K-12 school. It looked like it had an elementary or primary division as well as middle school and upper school.
Actually, there were some younger kids hanging around, weren't there?
So it's a complete school, and I mean, we don't see a lot of the staff members. So I counted maybe 7 or 8 teachers or something like that. So in that context, it was believable enough for me. I mean, you get a classroom that is old compared to the new schools, a little run down, felt accurate. The old desks with the covers that pop up, and a lot of it felt very the blackboards. I mean, I felt like it was believable. The little play yard, which is all concrete, and the kids are kicking the can on the playground. It felt. I didn't doubt the authenticity. I think I just doubted the storylines and the direction. It felt like wrong for the 60s. I was expecting something hipper, and the lessons that he teaches them are just so antiquated. It's really it's very funny. It's odd.
Now, children, we will learn about South America. Yes. I mean, I was just going to observe that things like those stairs that they have a couple of scenes on, those are really, really authentic school stairs. And my school had stairs just like those. The roller towels that we see in a couple of a couple of scenes. Again, my school had those exact roller towels. These horrible, nasty, grubby towels. And the idea being, well, you keep rolling it until you found a clean bit of towel for you to wipe your face on. Disgusting, but real. But I wonder whether someone who's never seen a school like that might watch this film and kind of think, are we in a school or a prison? It is a pretty oppressive, nasty building. And yet it's actually very genuine. There's a real kind of successful bit of art direction there to make a, because I think a lot of the film was shot, the interiors were done at Pinewood, I think. But it really looks like a real school. Yeah,
and it's funny because I agree with you about the authenticity. There are the scenes where he's going through the market and he's become part of the community. I think the Cockney is a little overplayed, but it seems very authentic. I mean, he's in that community. Those are the families of his children, and they embrace him, even though the students are worried about race later on. He's embraced in the community of adults. At times, I think it's an American film. At times, I think it's a British film. That's the place piece that I didn't know about. I didn't know if it was completely written by Americans and directed by Americans, and they brought Sidney Poitier over to London to make this film, or if it was really generated from Londoners, and so it's a proper English film. That piece is a little odd to me. And the fact that you had never seen it, and I don't know that many English people have seen it, seems like it's more something that the Americans love as, oh, God, this is going to be authentic 60s education in England film. So that's the place piece that I don't quite get. I'm not sure that I have a good handle on that.
It does strike me as it takes quite a British view of race controversy, insofar as even just that opening scene. I kind of feel like an American film that's going to open with a man of color sitting on a bus surrounded by white people. That would be kind of a political statement. And in this film, it's very, very much not, isn't it? It's a comedy scene. Yep. There is definitely racism, but I would argue that all of the characters on screen, the ones who are racist and the ones who are not, they all know that racism is wrong. Maybe that's part of its novelty for an American audience, actually.
It could be, yeah. But the Theo Western character, he's just unrelenting. It's one-liner after one-liner. And I don't remember it nearly as well from previous viewings, but this time it was right there out in the open.
People tell you who they are, don't they?
Yeah, it seems like it's a very important part of his character. And he doesn't come across as being. It's odd to say this. So it doesn't seem like he's super racist. He has no problem teaching with Thackeray and being with him, but every comment percolates just this new little stereotype after stereotype. It's just
he will not let it lie.
Not at all. Until the end, he too seems changed by Thackeray, right? Doesn't he? At the final dance, he's combed his hair, he's wearing a jacket, he's eating salad or whatever. I mean, he's been changed by Sir as well. So I think that's his arc.
This film, the other thing I wrote in my notes is this film features cinema's most passive-aggressive register taking of all time.
Oh, yeah.
The scene where Thackeray first turns up and he kind of reads out the kids' names and virtually none of them will respond, or the ones that do respond, have to be asked twice and then grunt. It's a great way to introduce all of your characters. But speaking of characters, this is an ideal opportunity to play my favourite game. Out of all these passive-aggressive teenagers, 16 going on 45, who am I?
Who am I?
Good. No, your segue was so good that I'm actually surprised that we're playing the game right now.
Yeah, that's it. We've wrapped it up. We've nailed that. Let's go home. Yep.
I'm not one of the teenagers, but I'm one of two of the elders.
Oh.
I'd love to think
you
of
and your
myself.
constant racist jokes. I know who you are, yes.
I'm Sidney Poitier in my dreams. If you can always be doctors in the films, then I can always be the teachers. And I responded to him as either he's really not a Yank, he's like Yank adjacent. He's living in London and teaching there, which is some of my experience. So I definitely liked that. Or I am E.R. Brathwaite, who wrote one project 3 times and lived to 104. I mean, what a life. Who would not want to be E.R. Brathwaite?
Yeah, you're right. He selected the winning lottery numbers.
How about you? Who were you? I'm thinking of doctors. No.
Well, I'm going to go back to the other film because I think Teachers Lounge is the story is told in such a way that I think the audience are supposed to see ourselves in Carla or Paula, depending on how badly you've written her name down in your notebook. So I really saw myself in her, insofar as early in the film I was cheering her along.
Yeah,
all the way for the first half hour. I was literally thinking to myself, "She's a good teacher."
Yeah.
She's kind of smiling and laughing with the kids, and there's this kind of like little slow-mo kind of like music and movement session or gym session or whatever, where she's kind of bouncing around with the kids and then getting to kind of like sort of run around and lift their knees up, and she's doing it with them. She's got this massive smile on her face, and I was thinking, oh, what a great teacher, she is great. And then equally, when she kind of messes up, and she takes this video and then does the wrong thing with it, and people start asking you, well, what about issues of privacy? And you've done the wrong thing here. I cringed just the same way that she does. I started to feel sick with sympathy. I really identify with that idea of you think you've done something clever, and then it turns out no, you've done something very, very stupid. I was right there with her, but I think the way the film is structured, I think the intention is that the whole audience is there with her. I think we are supposed to stand in her shoes for that 1 hour and 38 minutes. I think that's how that film works. So it's hardly an original statement to suggest that I felt like her. I think we all do.
Yeah. Very human, very fallible, understandable.
Good for her. Would that I had her youth and energy. Right, well, let's a lot of common ground between these films. Let's do our synthesis, see whether we can join the points on the pin board with little bits of string. That is what we're supposed to do, isn't it? I feel like we've put both of the films on the board, and I'm getting little bits of string, and I'm tying a pin to this bit and a pin to that bit, and there's a lot of similarities between these two.
Agreed.
They both take place entirely in a school. There's a lot of scenes inside the actual staff room. There are teachers who want to do the right thing. There are obstacles in the forms of either pupils or the other staff, protagonists who are outsiders. Lots and lots of common ground.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, the teachers' worlds are really reduced to their school lives. I think Thackeray in To Serve With Love gets more attention to his life outside of school that Carla doesn't get in the Teachers' Lounge. I think that actually makes a big difference. Like, I felt a little bit more grounded with Sir in To Serve With Love. And there's actually just one scene that really I thought was fantastic. It's you see a couple shots of his home life. He's ironing shirts at one point, and then there's this one night where you see his empty bed, and there's the camera sort of scans over his apartment, his little flat, and he's sitting upright in a chair, and he's gripping the arm of the chair with a sort of a clenched hand, and you just see that he's losing sleep over working with these students, and you know that he's frustrated, and that, you know, just that little piece. You get it with Carla too in some scenes, and the one that she's breathing into the bag that we talked about earlier, but you get a more rounded idea of Thackeray, which I think is helpful. You know that he's been an engineer. You know that he's worked in South America. You know that he really wants another job. You know that he's not married. The students start to learn things about him by asking him questions. So you get a lot more exposition. We're not huge fans of exposition, but it helps to have a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't have much at all in Teacher's Lounge. So I think that's a major difference between the two films.
I'll tell you one other big difference between the films. You may argue with this, but at least To Sir with Love has an ending.
Yes.
Whereas Teacher's Lounge, not so much. At least, I mean, there was, back in 1967, they didn't have this Euro trend for ambiguous endings.
Yeah.
And also, the new film, set in mainland Europe, has a much nicer school.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to ask you whether you thought that Teacher's Lounge is set in a school that is in a rough part of town. Are they supposed to be kind of, quite challenging kids from underprivileged backgrounds in that school?
I think, the implication is that it has immigrant kids, I think, to a certain extent. Like Ali is this one student who we think is Turkish, who's accused of stealing money just because he has lots of money in his wallet at one point. And then when the teacher's night comes in, you see some parents who look like they're from other countries as well. So I didn't get the feeling that it's a rough part of town, but it's at least a part of town that has immigrant student populations.
Yeah.
Which some would imply, that means it must be a rough part of town, depending on, the area. But even you also get the same theme in that Carla and one other teacher are from Poland, or at least speak Polish. So there's a certain otherness that happens in both films, actually.
Yes.
It's definitely in the German film. And then, Thackeray is the other to a certain extent in To Sir with Love. But even the kids themselves, that whole population is this sort of overlooked group. They're working class. They're not doing well academically. They've got to be adults in a few weeks because they've got to get a job, basically. There's some pressure on them there. So they're othered in a way from the rest of maybe the London schools or wealthier parts of England, in the same way that these other characters, I just said other again. I'm saying other too much, but anyway, they are people are being othered in both films.
Yeah. There's one other kind of big difference between the two films, I think, which is all about the child characters. I use that word advisedly. That I wrote down in my notebook, kind of in To Sir with Love, Thackeray comments, I think it's maybe to Gillian, that he says that the children in his class, that they're soon going to be not children, but people, is what he says. He doesn't say but adults, he says but people.
Yeah.
And I think, I wonder whether that's, quite a common 1960s, 1970s, or Victorian even notion that somehow children, aren't quite human. Children are just sort of proto-humans. They're these sort of walking blobs of ectoplasm.
Yeah.
They have no impulse control. They have no brains. They're just kind of pink blobs of stuff. But they're going to turn into people. Whereas at least Teacher's Lounge, doesn't entertain an idea like that at all. Right from the beginning, Carla is right on the kids' side. The children are always, at least by the good characters, treated as people. In those films. Thackeray makes this kind of what I thought was quite amusing speech to 16-year-olds. He tells them, again, I wrote this down, soon you'll be thinking about sex and girlfriends and boyfriends. Yeah. And I was thinking, buddy, you have missed the boat.
Yeah, he's late.
That's like telling 80 and 90-year-olds you should really start thinking about your pensions now. You're too late. You've missed the boat. That's it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, although that kind of seems quaint these days, that you need to tell 16-year-olds about sex. I was having a look at some of the trends today, actually, and it turns out young people today are having less sex. They're having sex later. They are drinking less alcohol than 20 years ago. Maybe, actually, the kids in Teachers' Lounge, are going to be less interested in, having sex than the kids in To Sir With Love, even when they are the same age as those older-looking kids. I don't know. It did make me think about what's changed, not necessarily between the two films, as between the society of 1967 and the society of today. Is it too expensive for kids to go out and to dance to instrumental bands these days? Are they just all looking at their phones the whole time? I don't know. I read in my notes, what's happened to childhood? But I think that's outside the scope of the pod.
Yeah. That's a big question. There must be a pod for that. There's a pod for everything. Really.
There's a pod for everything.
60 years has made a lot of difference. And that's, 2 or 3 generations, how you look at it. So I think the students are very different today, even from when I was in school. And the students in the 2 films are really different. I had written down that, and you've mentioned this, I think, kids in To Sir With Love they're a little bit too nice too soon. He makes amazing progress with just one class, basically. And then kids in the Teachers' Lounge are kind of too bad too soon in some way. Like they start to turn on the teacher, they turn on one another.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
I think in both cases, from my own dealing with students, I think it takes a lot longer. And I think filmmakers in both cases could have taken that time to really explore those things, those turns, because they are really interesting turns, but they're done too fast in both films.
Yeah.
But the 2 films really feature teachers who see kids' struggles outside of school, which is, again, this is a little bit ironic because we don't see much of the lives outside of school, but the teachers inherently know that in both cases they're struggling outside of schools, or they can imagine the circumstances that their students are living in. And that seems to be a feature that sets them apart from the other teachers in both films.
Tell me if you agree with this, which is like the last thing I wrote in my notebook. I said the takeaway from these films is that teachers are kind of cut from the same cloth today as they were 60 years ago. But children and the society that creates and nurtures them are actually quite different.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. Yeah.
So yay for teachers. Teachers, bit of constancy.
Yes.
Yes, it is the children that are wrong.
Well, my takeaway, now that you've mentioned yours, stay out of the gymnasium. I mean, that's the theme that's emerging. That's where all the bad crap happens. And if you throw in the holdovers, which we saw not so long ago, where there's a shoulder separation there, you go into a gymnasium, you're either going to get in a fight, you'll be hit with a laptop to your face, you will collapse the vault underneath your body weight, or you'll get into a boxing match with your teacher. I mean, just stay out of the gymnasium. Period.
Or you'll be told you're fat. Yeah.
Fats can't do it. You're a boy and you're a fat boy. It's a great scene.
Right. Well, that's teachers for you, eh? Yeah. That's them teachers. Yeah. We've just got time to talk about what is also playing at this theatre.
You absolutely have to go first on this one, because I don't know that the Two Real Cinema Club listeners don't know this, but we just did this 5 days ago. We just did 2 episodes a few days ago. So
yes, we're really compressed. So there's been barely time to watch the 2 films for the podcast, let alone something else. But I have got something on my something else is playing at my theatre. I've been good for a change.
Okay.
No books, but at least I've watched something. We have been watching Ghosts US, which is a family-friendly, well, reasonably family-friendly sitcom based on the BBC series of the same name. So Ghosts is a well-regarded British sitcom that we've all been able to enjoy together, actually, the children and the adults, about a young couple who inherit a large stately home, which is an absolute terrible state of repair. And the wife of the couple has an accident, and when she wakes up from the accident, she can see ghosts. I can see dead people, but her husband can't. Ooh. And so it's the house is haunted by a whole bunch of ghosts who all died on the property, but they're all from different eras.
Oh.
So there is a World War One ghost, and there is a 1980s ghost, and there is a caveman ghost, and there are all these different time periods are all represented. The ghosts can all see each other, but only the wife can talk to and hear the ghosts.
Oh.
Great, cute idea. Good sitcom in this country. Ran for 4 series, which is quite a lot of episodes for a British sitcom. And we devoured all of those, and now we're watching the US version, which is the same but different.
Okay.
Still enjoyable. This is going to sound terribly rude. US version, a little bit more on the nose.
Yeah, of course.
But there's still some good gags. So we've been enjoying that, and it's fun to compare A with B, which is what we do every week on this podcast.
Oh, boy, yes.
Have you managed to squeeze anything in? And I will let you off the hook, because I'll say, well, if you haven't seen anything, I know because you told me earlier, you have read the beginning chapter of 4 different books this week.
Yep, I'm not even going to talk about that, though, because that yielded very little joy. I think it's important to indulge in some of the other art forms as well. And I find that I live up to I think it's a John Lennon adage, isn't it? That good artists borrow and great artists steal. Did he say that? I thought
you were going to say I am the walrus.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
That is also John Lennon. I like to go to see other things just to get ideas. And I saw the Manchester Collective on Friday night. I don't know if you know, they're from England. They're from Manchester. It's
really good football team, actually. Yeah, it would have been a good turnout.
No, far from it. I think at its heart, it's sort of a chamber orchestra, an orchestral ensemble, but they do world music. I mean, they also had a djembe player and an electric bass player and fantastic cellist. So they're just defying genre and playing. They would do a Haydn quartet, but then they'd bust into some sort of Afro rhythm and just rock. They were fantastic and very, very engaging and a lot of audience interaction. I was really amazed with them. So keep an eye out for them if you haven't heard them. I think they're doing a really fast American tour, and then they're doing something over in England somewhere.
The Manchester Collective.
Manchester Collective, yeah. And then today, just right before the pod, I saw a Lynn Nottage play called Clydes, about formerly incarcerated people working in a sandwich shop for a woman who's one of the only people who will hire people who are formerly imprisoned. So. And Lynn Nottage is someone who I keep Googling her name because it keeps coming up, and I've seen some of her plays, but I always forget them. So she's very well regarded. She's won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, which is a pretty big deal over here, and she had a MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant. And I can't see the genius in her work just yet.
Good job you don't give it those grants.
Yeah, exactly. So she's someone I want to. I keep. It's uncanny. I always forget what she's written, and then I've seen 2 or 3 of the plays and not really been blown away by them, and then I forget about her, and then the name comes up again, and she just happens to be in the subscription for the theater company that I see here. And yeah, it was okay. It was good to just see stuff on stage, whether it's music or theater, and in all cases, I usually get some kind of idea that I can bring into my own work. So,
I know you have recently been working on a play about prison inmates.
Precisely, yeah. So that rung a bell for me. It was nice to see how someone else does it, and they're thinking about the prisoners after they've been incarcerated. So she's definitely got some ideas and some themes there. But
I'm guessing it's also, when you're writing a play, it's reassuring when you go and see someone else who's done it worse.
Yes, oh God, yes, I can do it. I can do that. Same thing with films too. So, yeah, there's hope for all of us yet.
There is hope. If you want some of that hope, you can join us on Instagram, where we are at Two Real Cinema Club. You can read the blog, tworealcinemaclub.com. You can comment on our YouTube channel. You can email us. Please let us know what you think. We are tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Ask us questions, correct our mistakes, like and subscribe. Next time, we're going to go to the popcorn counter next time. And talk about something, I don't know, we'll figure it out when we get there. And then the week after that, we're going to be talking about Civil War.
Ooh.
which feels a little bit too close to home for me to be entirely comfortable.
Yeah.
And we'll be comparing it to
Land of Freedom, 1995 Ken Loach film.
Ken Loach, yes. So, nice to watch Ken Loach again. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, you better go and do your lesson prep, I suppose. I see. Not that I saw any teachers do any lesson prep in any of the films that we watched this week, but apparently it's a thing.
Nah, they'll learn that. I don't even have to be there.
Let's go and eat popcorn instead.
Let's do.